Oh my God, Nick, can someone get her out of here? These service hires get worse every year.
They didn't just ignore me. They looked right through me. 300 people in that ballroom. Senators, billionaires, women dripping in diamonds, and not one of them saw me until the glass hit the floor. And even then, they didn't see me. They saw a problem. They saw someone to blame. I was on my knees on cold marble, blood on my finger, shame burning up my throat. And the most powerful woman in that room didn't even turn her head. She just lifted one hand and said, "Can someone remove her?" Like I was something spilled, like I wasn't a person. I told myself what I always tell myself: stay small, stay quiet. You need this. But something was already wrong with that night before the glass ever broke. I just didn't know it yet, and neither did the man watching me from above. I almost said no. The call came 48 hours before the Duval Gala. Last minute, better pay than usual, black tie dress code for staff. My agency said a slot opened when someone pulled out sick. I needed the rent covered. I said yes. I should have listened to that quiet pull in my stomach when I walked through the service entrance and felt the air change. The Duval estate didn't need to say anything to make you feel small. It just did it. Through the height of the ceilings, the weight of the chandeliers, the way the permanent staff moved around the temps like we were furniture someone had placed slightly in the wrong spot. The event coordinator handed out assignments without looking up once. Mrs. Helena Duval swept through the kitchen during setup, stopped in front of the tray I was holding, and moved it 2 inches to the left. No words. And no eye contact. Just correction. I kept my face still. I was good at that. 3 years of this kind of work teaches you to make yourself small enough to fit whatever space they give you. You don't push back. You don't react. You stay useful and you stay quiet. And at the end of the night, you go home with your check and you don't think about any of it. That was the plan. Then I met Elise. Elise Duval was maybe 26, the kind of beautiful that came with the full knowledge that every person in a room was tracking her. She had this particular way of speaking about the service staff while we were standing right there. Not to us, about us. Like we had no more awareness than the floral centerpieces. At one point she said, to the woman beside her, loudly enough for 3 of us to hear, "Where do they even find these people?" I kept moving. I kept my face neutral. What I was not ready for was the east corridor. Elise passed me near the corridor entrance, close enough that her shoulder caught the edge of my tray. Not a full hit, barely contact, but enough. The wine glass tipped. I reached. I've always been fast, but the stem caught another glass on the way down, and the sound that rang out across that marble floor stopped the room like a gunshot. Everything turned. I was already on my knees before anyone spoke, hands moving, trying to make it smaller, trying to disappear. But the silence that landed over that room wasn't the kind that forgives. It was the kind that decides. "Oh my God, can someone get her out of here?" The laughter came in waves, easy, comfortable laughter. At the kind people use when something makes them feel better about themselves. Mrs. Duval didn't look at me once. She raised her champagne and said to no one in particular, "These service hires get worse every year." I kept my eyes down. I kept my hands moving. I told myself I was invisible. I did not know that invisible was exactly what someone had been counting on. And I did not know that a man on the balcony above had just set down his glass, turned to his assistant, and said 4 words that would rewrite my entire night. "Find out her name." Wait, before I tell you what he did with that name, I have to ask you something. Have you ever been humiliated in a room full of people and had to hold it together like nothing happened? Because that's exactly where she is right now. As in, I promise you, it gets so much darker before the light comes. Subscribe right now and don't you dare look away, because what's coming next? Nobody in that room saw it coming either. I scrubbed the stain long after it was gone. That's the thing about humiliation nobody warns you about. The mess cleans up fast. But something else stays. In your hands, in the back of your throat, in the way your whole body goes stiff every time someone walks past you after it happens. I had wrapped my finger with a paper towel. One of the shards had caught me, small but sharp. And I kept moving because stopping wasn't an option. The kitchen staff worked around me like I wasn't there. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody said anything at all. That was normal. What wasn't normal was Camille. She appeared at my elbow about 10 minutes after the incident, pressed a proper bandage into my palm and said, "Don't let them see you bothered. That's exactly what they want." I looked at her. She had a warm face, easy smile, the kind of person who felt familiar before you'd even learned her name. She told me she'd seen Elise do this before. Pick someone, manufacture a moment, give the room something to laugh at. She said Elise had been nervous all evening, that something about one of the guests had her rattled. I filed it away. What I did not file away, what I should have, was how fast Camille had appeared, how ready she was, how the bandage was already in her hand before she even looked at mine. I was too shaken to catch it. I went back to work, and that's when things got strange. Not loudly strange, quietly. The kind of shift you feel in a room before you have words to explain it. The head of security, a broad, composed man who hadn't glanced in my direction once all night, repositioned himself near the east corridor as I passed, not blocking me, just present, deliberate. A senior waiter who had redirected me twice that evening suddenly changed his route to stay within a few feet of my section. And the event coordinator, the same woman who had not made eye contact with me since I arrived, paused mid-conversation with a guest and looked over her shoulder. She found me immediately, like she already knew exactly where I was standing. It lasted 2 seconds, then she turned back. I told myself I was imagining it, that shame had made me paranoid. As I went back to carrying glasses and staying invisible, it was only much later that I understood what I had actually been watching. Those people weren't paying attention to me because of what happened. They were paying attention because of what was about to happen. Somewhere above the ballroom, a man named Han So-jin had already received information that told him this night was not what it appeared to be, and that the woman everyone kept walking past was connected to something none of us had been told the full truth about, including me. My phone buzzed once inside my apron pocket. Unknown number. One line. Leave the building before the toast. I stood completely still. My hands stopped moving. I looked down at the bandage on my finger, the one Camille had pressed into my hand before I even asked for help. And for the first time all night, the feeling in my stomach wasn't shame. It was fear. Because someone in that building had known I was going to need that bandage, before the glass ever fell. The elevator doors opened, and everything changed. Not loudly, not with any kind of announcement, just the air was different up here, quieter, heavier, the kind of quiet that belongs to people who never have to raise their voice to get what they want. I almost turned around. My hand actually moved toward the button, but the doors had already closed behind me. The penthouse was floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides. The city stretched out below like something that could be bought. No music, no staff, just space and expensive silence and him, standing at the far window with his back to me, still in his jacket, like he hadn't moved since I'd seen him on that balcony. He let the silence sit for a moment. Then, Liora Bennett. My breath caught. "How do you know my—" "I know a great deal," he said. Calm, final, no performance in it at all. He turned then, and I got my first real look at Han So-jin up close. He was younger than the power in his voice suggested, mid-30s maybe, with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from being relaxed. It comes from never being surprised. He looked at me the way nobody in that ballroom had looked at me all night, like I was worth studying. "You were set up," he said. Not a question. "Yes," I said, because lying felt pointless. "Why didn't you say something? Defend yourself?" A short, tired sound came out of me before I could stop it. Not quite a laugh. Ma, to who? Them? I shook my head. They decided what I was the moment I walked in. Nothing I said would have changed that. He studied me for another second. Then he crossed to the table beside him and turned a laptop screen toward me. Security footage, the east corridor, Elisa's shoulder, the deliberate angle of contact. Frame by frame, it was not an accident, and the footage made that plain. Someone disabled 2 of the 3 corridor cameras before the event, he said. Whoever set this up had inside access, and whoever they work for has been leaking confidential acquisition data from my company for the past 4 months. I looked at him. What does that have to do with me? You were placed at this event specifically, he said. Your original agency booking was switched 48 hours ago. Someone redirected you here, to this room, to that corridor. The floor felt less steady than it had a moment ago. They used you as a distraction, Seojin continued, because they knew exactly how this room would treat you, and they counted on you staying quiet. Something hot moved through my chest. Not embarrassment this time. Fury. Help me find out who, he said quietly. Move through the rest of the evening. Observe. Report back. In exchange, I will make sure Elise Duval answers for tonight, publicly, and I will make sure your name is cleared in front of every person who laughed. I looked at him for a long moment. Why would I trust you? His expression didn't shift. You shouldn't, he said simply. Not yet. But ask yourself, has anyone else in this building offered you anything tonight? The silence answered for me. What do you need me to do? I walked back into that ballroom a different person than the one who left it. Not visibly. Nothing about me had changed on the outside. Same uniform, same tray, same careful neutral face. But my eyes were different now. I wasn't moving through the room trying to disappear anymore. I was reading it. And what I saw made my skin tighten. The fake server was the first thing I clocked. A man near the east wall, who had been holding the same glass of water for 40 minutes without drinking. He wasn't watching the guests. He was watching the exits. And every few minutes, his gaze swept back to the cluster of suits surrounding Seojin's business associates like he was counting something. I noted him, kept moving. Camille found me 12 minutes later. She materialized at my side the way she had in the kitchen, warm, easy, just a little too perfectly timed. She told me she'd overheard something, that Elise had slipped away to the east corridor again, that she was meeting someone near the private access stairwell, that if I went now, I might see exactly what Elise was trying to hide. She said it like she was doing me a favor. She said it with that same open, trustworthy face. And I almost went. I had my tray shifted and my weight already turning when something stopped me. The detail. Camille had said private access stairwell, not back stairwell, not service stairs. Private access. A term you'd only know if you'd studied the floor plan of this building before tonight. Camille was a temp hire, same as me. I turned back to her slowly. Which corridor, exactly? She described it without hesitating. Precise. Confident. My face stayed neutral. Let me finish this round, I said. I'll head over. She nodded, already drifting away. I sent Chaewon, Seojin's assistant, a 2-line message from the phone he'd given me in the penthouse. Girl named Camille, service staff. She's feeding me directions. Check her. Then I did the opposite of what she said and moved to the north corridor instead. Mrs. Duval found me there. Of course she did. She stopped directly in front of me, not to ask for anything, not to give an instruction, just to look. Yet the way someone looks at a thing they want gone. I'm not sure what conversation you had upstairs, she said, her voice low and precise. But I want you to understand something. Whatever you think you know about this evening, it won't help you. People like you don't leave rooms like this with anything. She let that land. Then she moved on. My hands were steady on the tray. My jaw was not. 30 seconds later, Chewan's response came through. Camille Osei. Not registered with any temp agency. Phone number traces to a prepaid. She arrived with a credentials tag that was reported lost by another staffer 2 weeks ago. I read it twice. Then, there's more, the next message read. Footage from the north hallway. The man near the east wall. The one with the water glass. We ran his face. A pause. He's a junior associate at the law firm handling the merger challenge. Elise Duval's legal team sent him here tonight. I looked up slowly and found him across the room. He was already looking back at me. I need to stop right here and ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone who is already working against you the whole time? Because she's standing in a room full of people like that right now. And she doesn't even know the worst part yet. If this story is hitting you somewhere real, subscribe. Right now. Because the next chapter is where everything she thought she understood gets turned completely upside down. Seojin didn't confront Marcus. That was the first thing that told me this man operated on a different level than anyone I had ever been around. He came back down to the main floor 40 minutes after our meeting, rejoined his associates, laughed at the right moments, accepted a fresh glass of champagne, and treated Marcus Webb, his head of security, with the exact same composed deference he always had. Like nothing had changed. Meanwhile, according to Chae-won, everything had. The footage didn't lie. Marcus had disabled those corridor cameras. The communication trail from Seojin's own network had Marcus's credentials attached to 3 of the 4 data leaks over the past 4 months. 7 years of loyalty. And every one of those years, apparently, Ben had a price attached to it that someone else had been willing to pay. I learned all of this in pieces, in brief exchanges through the phone Chae-won had given me, while I carried trays and smiled at no one and watched a room full of powerful people perform trust they didn't have. What hit me hardest wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how normal Marcus looked. He stood near the main entrance, arms loose at his sides, eyes working the room with the same steady professionalism I'd watched all evening. He looked like exactly what he was supposed to be. He looked safe. I thought about how many times in my life I had been fooled by someone who looked safe. Chae-won sent me something else between those messages. A file. Your original employment record. Before the paralegal firm, we pulled your full background when Mr. Han asked for your name. There's a complaint on file, suppressed, against a supervisor at Hartwell Legal. A supervisor who took your casework, filed it under his credentials, and had you quietly removed when you raised the issue internally. I stood completely still in the middle of that moving room. The complaint was received and buried, the next message read. We're still tracing who signed off on the burial. 3 years. 3 years I had been carrying trays and staying invisible and telling myself it was temporary, that I was rebuilding, that what happened at Hartwell was something I just had to get past. And someone in this building tonight had a file that said my silence had been manufactured, that I hadn't failed, I had been removed. My grip on the tray tightened until my knuckles ached. But Camille appeared one more time. She came close, closer than before, and her voice had dropped the warmth it usually carried. I'm going to say this once, she said, looking straight ahead rather than at me. Leave before the toast. Whatever you think is happening tonight, you're not going to come out of it clean. Walk out now, and none of this touches you. I looked at her profile. Who sent you here, Camille? She didn't answer. She walked away instead. And I stood there in the middle of that glittering lying room and made a decision. I was not leaving. Not because I was brave. Because I was done being the person that rooms like this counted on to disappear quietly. Whoever had buried my complaint, they were somewhere in this building tonight. And so was I. She came to me. I didn't go looking for Director Amara Okafor. She found me near the service alcove off the north corridor, the one spot in the entire building where the cameras had a blind angle, which told me she already knew the floor plan better than anyone here. She was maybe 60, Nigerian British, by the accent, precise, unhurried, the kind of woman who had spent decades in rooms that tried to make her feel like a guest and had long since stopped acknowledging the attempt. She wore no name badge. She didn't need one. The way she held that room's air around her said everything about who she was. She looked at me for a moment before she spoke. "You're angrier than I expected," she said. "Good." I wasn't in the mood for compliments. Who are you?" "Someone who has been watching this room for longer than tonight." She produced a card from her inside pocket and held it flat in her palm without offering it forward, just showing me. "Metropolitan Financial Crimes Board, Senior Director." "I know what was taken from you at Hartwell Legal," she said. "I know your supervisor's name, the dates of the filings, and the name of the person who received your internal complaint and chose to close it without review." My throat tightened. "How?" "Because Hartwell Legal is part of the same financial network I have spent 14 months building a case against." She finally extended the card. "Elise Duval's family holds a silent stake in that firm. The people who ended your career and the people who set you up tonight are connected. But they are the same circle." The alcove felt smaller than it had 30 seconds ago. "You redirected me here," I said. It wasn't a question. The pieces had been lining up since Chaewon told me about the agency switch. "Your office moved my booking. You put me in that corridor." She didn't look away. "Yes. You let them humiliate me." "I needed an unaffiliated witness inside the service staff," she said, and her voice carried no apology in it, not because she didn't understand the weight of what she was saying, but because she had decided the truth was more respectful than softening it. "Someone with no known connection to my office, someone this room would overlook completely." "You used my erasure," I said, and my voice came out quieter than I intended. "You knew how they would treat me, and you used it." "Yes," she said again. The silence between us was not comfortable. "I also have documentation," she continued, "that can restore your professional record. Formally. Publicly. And I have the authority to ensure your former supervisor faces a full board review." "And in exchange?" "Stay through the toast," she said. "You've already seen things tonight that will matter in a courtroom. I need you in that room when the evidence goes public. A witness who was treated the way you were treated, who stood in this building and was dismissed and disrespected and kept going anyway, carries a kind of weight that no attorney on my team can manufacture." I looked at her for a long time. "You're asking me to trust you," I said, "after telling me you set me up." "No," she said carefully. "I'm offering you a choice, which is more than anyone else in this building has done." She left me alone in the alcove with her card and the weight of everything she'd said. And I stood there thinking about choices, about how they look like power from the outside and feel like impossible pressure from the inside. Then my phone buzzed. Chaewon. "The complaint at Hartwell. We found the second signature, the one who co-signed the burial order." A name followed. I read it once, then I read it again. Chaewon Park. I kept walking. That was the only thing I knew how to do in the 30 seconds after I read that name on my screen. Just keep moving, keep the tray level, keep my face doing the thing it had learned to do in 3 years of invisible work. Don't react. Not here, not yet. Chaewon Park, Seojin's assistant. It's the man who had handed me the phone. The man who had been feeding me information all evening with the easy, professional calm of someone who was completely certain which side he was on. He had co-signed the order that buried my complaint at Hartwell. He had been inside this network long before tonight. And somewhere in the last 2 hours, he had either not recognized my name, or he had recognized it immediately and decided to keep running his part of the operation anyway. I didn't go to Seojin. Not immediately. I needed 30 seconds to think without someone watching my face. Here is what I knew for certain. The footage of Elise was real. The financial transaction records Okafor had shown me were real. My own experience in that ballroom, on my knees on that floor, was real. And nobody had manufactured my humiliation. Nobody had manufactured my anger. What had been manufactured was my access to this room. my position in it, my usefulness to people with agendas I hadn't been told about. I could walk out. Okafor had offered me that. The documentation she held could restore my record whether I stayed or left. But my former supervisor, the man who took 3 years of my work and filed it under his name, was somewhere in this building, Elisa's guest, in this room right now. And the evidence that would expose him publicly was sitting in a presentation system that Okafor's team had just given me access to. I made my choice. I found Seojin near the east edge of the ballroom, 3 minutes before Elisa's scheduled toast. I stood beside him without making it look like a meeting. Chaewon, I said quietly, keeping my eyes forward. He co-signed the legal burial that ended my career. He's been inside whatever this is from the beginning. A beat. Sojin's glass paused on the way to his mouth. Then it continued. He took a sip. His face showed nothing. I know, he said. I turned to look at him. I found out 40 minutes ago, he said. I've been feeding him false positioning data since then. He thinks I'm moving to block Elise's toast. He's already communicated that to whoever he reports to. They're expecting me to shut the presentation down, which means they're not expecting what I'm actually about to do. I stared at him. You were going to tell me, I said. It landed somewhere between a question and an accusation. I'm telling you now. That's not the same thing. He looked at me then. Really looked. The way he had in the penthouse, like I was the only clear signal in a room full of noise. No, he said quietly. It isn't. And I'm sorry. I held that for exactly 1 second. Then, the presentation system. I have access. I know that too. So what are we doing? He set his glass down on a passing tray with the unhurried ease of a man who had already decided how this night ended. We're letting her start the toast, he said, and then we're taking the room. She found out she was used. By the villain. By the ally. By the man she was starting to trust. And she still chose to stay and fight. If you've ever had to stand up in a room that counted on you to stay quiet, this moment right here is for you. Subscribe right now. Not for me, for every person who was buried and refused to stay down. The last 3 chapters are where everything finally breaks open, and you do not want to miss what she does next. The toast was 2 minutes away. I could feel it in the room, that particular shift in energy when a crowd moves from circulating to gathering, when glasses get refilled and bodies turn toward a center point. Elise was already moving toward the front of the ballroom, unhurried, radiant, the kind of confident that comes from believing the night still belongs to you. She had no idea, or maybe she did, and she was betting that her family name was still worth more than whatever Han Seojin could put on a screen. Either way, she was wrong. And I was standing near the presentation access panel, a slim, wall-mounted terminal behind the stage curtain that Okafor's team had quietly unlocked 40 minutes ago. When Camille appeared one last time, she didn't pretend this time. No warm face, no easy smile. She just stood close and spoke low. Marcus knows you have access to the panel. He flagged it to Chaewon 20 minutes ago. Chaewon hasn't passed it up yet, but he will. You have less time than you think. I looked at her. Why are you telling me this? She was quiet for a moment. Because I got into this thinking it was just a job, she said. And then I watched what they did to you in that ballroom, and I couldn't. She stopped. I'm not a good person, she said finally, but I'm not that. She walked away before I could respond. But I stood there for 3 seconds holding everything at once. Camille's warning, Haewon's betrayal, Okafor's manipulation, Seojin's admission, Marcus at the door, Elise at the microphone, my former supervisor somewhere in that crowd wearing a guest badge and a clean conscience he had no right to. 3 seconds. Then I made the only move that actually belonged to me. I pulled out the phone Chaewon had given me, the one connected to the presentation system, and I sent one message to Okafor. I'm running it, not you, not Seojin, me. Her response took 11 seconds. Understood. I stepped behind the curtain. The access panel was simple, A single input interface, already loaded with the files Okafor's team had prepared: financial records, transaction logs, the corridor footage, at the suppressed legal complaint from Hartwell, all of it compiled, sequenced, ready. I looked at it for a moment. 3 years of carrying trays and telling myself I was rebuilding. 3 years of making myself small enough to fit whatever space powerful people decided I was allowed to occupy. 3 years of a story that someone else wrote for me after they took mine. My finger hovered. From the ballroom, I heard Elise's voice lift into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention." "You have it," I said quietly, to no one. And I pressed play. The screen behind the stage flickered once, then it came to life, and in the 10 seconds it took for the room to understand what it was looking at, I stepped out from behind the curtain, walked to the edge of the stage, and stood in a room that had spent the entire evening deciding I didn't exist. I stood there, and I let them see me. All of me. For the first time all night. I didn't look down. The room didn't understand immediately. That's the thing about truth when it arrives in public. It takes a moment to register. People's eyes went to the screen, then to Elise, then back to the screen, like they were waiting for someone to explain that this was a mistake, a technical error, something with a comfortable resolution that meant they could go back to their champagne. There was no comfortable resolution. The first thing on screen was the corridor footage, frame by frame. Elise's shoulder, the angle of contact, the deliberate shift of weight before impact, and in the corner of the frame, a timestamp, that and the file notation showing which cameras had been disabled beforehand and under whose access credentials. A woman near the front of the crowd made a sharp sound. Elise's face had gone the particular color of someone who has just realized that the ground they were standing on was never as solid as they thought. "This is... someone has tampered with... the authentication chain is embedded in the file metadata," Seojin said from somewhere to my left, his voice carrying across the room without effort. "It's been independently verified." He didn't move toward the stage. He didn't perform anything. He just stood there and let the evidence do what evidence does. The second file loaded. Transaction records, dates, amounts, account numbers, the kind of financial architecture that takes years to build and seconds to recognize once someone lays it flat. Names appeared that made several guests in the front rows go very still. Board members, investors, people who had been in this building all evening accepting champagne and making deals under cover of a social event that had been designed, at least in part, to move money that wasn't supposed to move. Elise stepped back from the microphone. "I want my attorney." "He's already been detained," Okafor said, and she walked forward from the back of the room with the unhurried authority of someone who has been waiting for this specific moment for 14 months. "The gentleman near the east wall, your legal team's associate. My office took him aside 12 minutes ago." The room shifted, not loudly. The loudest power shifts never are. Then the third file. My Hartwell complaint, my name, my work, the actual case files, the original drafts, the metadata timestamps proving authorship, laid beside the versions my supervisor had filed under his name, side by side. Undeniable. And beneath it, the two signatures on the burial order, his name, and Jaewon's. I heard movement to my right and glanced over. 2 members of Okafor's team had positioned themselves on either side of Jaewon. He wasn't being dramatic about it, he just stopped moving, like a man who had always known this moment was coming and had simply been waiting to find out what shape it would take. Seojin looked at him once, then he looked away. That was all. Then he turned toward me and said my name. Not the maid, not her, not a gesture or a nod. Meant my name, full, clear, in front of every person in that room. "This is Liora Bennett," he said. "She has been in this building all evening. She was placed here deliberately. She was humiliated deliberately. And she is the reason that what you have just seen is now on record." 300 people. Silence. I didn't perform anything. I didn't smile or stand straighter or make a moment of it. I just looked out at the room. And the room, for the first time all evening, looked back. Elise stared at me from across the marble floor, all her composure finally, completely gone. I met her eyes and I held them. "How does it feel," I said quietly, "to be the one everyone's watching?" She had no answer. For the first time all night, neither did the room. The ballroom emptied slowly, at the way rooms do after something irreversible has happened. Not all at once. People don't leave cleanly after a night like that. They drift in clusters, speaking in low voices, recalculating. 3 of the board members were met at the exit by members of Okafor's team and redirected to a quieter room where, I was told later, they would spend several hours answering questions they had not prepared for. Elise left without speaking to anyone. Marcus Webb was stopped at the door. Not dramatically, not with any of the theater a moment like that might seem to deserve. 2 people stepped into his path, and that was that. 7 years of proximity to Han So-jin, and it ended in a corridor with a quiet word and a hand on an elbow. I watched all of it from the edge of the room. Okafor found me before she left. She stood beside me for a moment without speaking, which I was starting to understand was her version of respect. "The Hartwell filing has been submitted," she said. "Formal review opens Monday. Your name will be on the original casework by end of next week, publicly." I nodded. "And my supervisor?" "Board review. Likely disbarment." A pause. "There is also a position, if you want it, not as a favor, as a correction. Junior counsel, Financial Crimes Division. Your background qualifies you. It always did." I looked at her. "You still used me," I said. "Yes," she said. "And I would do it again. But I would tell you first." She left without waiting for my answer. Camille was already gone. No paperwork, no record, and no trace beyond a borrowed credentials tag that had been returned to the coat check desk sometime in the last hour. I didn't ask where she went. I hoped she was okay. I meant that. The ballroom was nearly empty when Seo-jin came to stand beside me. He didn't open with anything smooth. "I knew Jaewon's name was in that file before I came to this event," he said. "I didn't tell you because I needed to know whether he would protect the operation or burn it. I used your situation to find out." I turned to look at him. "You could have told me that in the penthouse." "Yes. But you didn't." "No." The honesty of it landed differently than an apology would have. No softening, no performance of remorse. Just the plain shape of what he had done, offered without decoration. And I thought about trust, about how many versions of it I had encountered in the last 4 hours. Camille's false warmth, Okafor's calculated honesty, Jaewon's professional calm, Seo-jin's controlled transparency that arrived just slightly too late. None of them were simple. None of them were clean. Neither was I. "They put me in that building," I said, "expecting me to be invisible, expecting me to absorb whatever they needed and stay quiet and go home." "Yes," he said. "They did that because it had always worked before." A pause. "Also yes." I looked out at the city through the ballroom's tall windows. All that light. All those buildings full of rooms like this one, where power arranged itself and people like me were placed carefully into positions designed to serve someone else's story. "I'm not taking the job Okafor offered," I said. "Not yet. I want to choose it when I'm ready. Not because tonight made me feel like I owe someone a next move." Seo-jin was quiet for a moment. "That's the first decision tonight that was entirely yours," he said. "I know," I said. And for the first time since I walked through that service entrance, since the glass broke and the room turned and I was on my knees on that cold floor telling myself to stay small and stay invisible, I felt like myself again. Not the version of me that rooms like this had spent years trying to create. The one that had always been there underneath it. The one they never actually managed to touch. They ignored me all night, and it still wasn't enough. She walked into that building invisible. She walked out of it with her name on record, her work restored, and not one single apology to make for how she got there. And I need to ask you something before you go. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea what you were actually carrying? Have you ever been placed in a room that was designed to shrink you and had to decide quietly whether to let it? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit something real in you, like it, share it, and subscribe to this channel right now. Not for the algorithm, for the next person sitting somewhere alone tonight who needs to hear that being overlooked was never the same thing as being powerless. There are more stories like this one waiting for you here. Stories about people who were counted out and came back in ways nobody saw coming. The next one drops soon. Make sure you're here for it.